page. So we always like to present these things in terms of a realistic scenario. So in this case, imagine we have a line of business application which periodically writes files to a share. Now that share might be on a NAS running some embedded Linux system or something like that, and we can't monitor it directly. But it does, so the application itself has to raise some alert. And what happens is that if it has trouble writing to that NAS, it generates an alert. The alert simply says something isn't working, but it doesn't give us any hint as to why. So what we want to do is we want to present more information in the alert so it's more actionable. Now, Kevin Holman, and those of you who know him know how wonderful his work is. He's produced a new fragment which we're going to use here just to show what we can do. This new fragment watches for events, and then it runs a PowerShell script to get more information. So we're going to go through and do that. I'm going to be demonstrating all of this. And of course, reading ahead, you all see my little bullet point there that says, but the share isn't accessible by the default action account. This is something that is fairly common. So we'll show you how to create a secure reference, modify the rule to use that secure reference, set the credentials, and then confirm the results. So let me stop this sharing here. I want to cancel that, get back to my notes here. And what I want to do is come back to sharing this screen here. Somebody just sent me a smile, thank you. So, as I mentioned, we have this share. So here's the share itself. For the demo, I'm just using a share of virtual hard disks on a Hyper-V server because it has 13 files, roughly 475 gigabytes of space used here. And of course, I have access to this. We have a script which will get us more information for that. So this is the script running in PowerShell. What I'm going to do is I just select and move over to that as the current directory, that disk. I get a list of all the VHD files by doing a dir for everything that ends with VHDX. I'm going to produce a count. So that's all I need to do for that. And then I want to add up the size of these things. So I start with a sum of 0. I want to iterate over every element in that list. And I want to simply add to the sum the length of the individual file. So that'll give me the length in bytes. Honestly, looking at file sizes in bytes is sort of useful. So I'm going to divide by a gigabyte. So we get our number in gigabytes. So I take that sum, divide by 1024 cubed, which is a gigabyte, and we'll get our size in gigabytes. And then I create a variable called stuff, and you'll see where this is used. That's Kevin's name, not mine. And all we're going to do is we're going to report on the number of files and the total file size. And so when we look at the alert, we'll be able to see, let's say that share only has a terabyte of space, and when we look at the file size in gigabytes, we're almost at the terabyte level. We'll know that it's running out of space, or if there's a limit on the maximum number of files, it at least gives us something else to work with. So if we run this, you don't actually see much, but that's because it's created this variable called stuff. And if I display that, it tells me that I have 13 files and 475.36 blah, blah, blah gig. We could format that better if we wanted to, but this is sufficient for a demonstration. Now, to simulate our events coming in, I'm using event create. And that's this command here. I specify an event ID of 123. This is the message. And as we're suggesting in this scenario, we don't get much information. All we know is unable to create an event in the share. It'll be an error event in the application log. So what we need to do is we need to create a management pack to monitor this. So I'm going to be using MP Author Professional for this. We could do all of this in MP Studio as well. And in fact, I'll be saving things in the store database. There's no good reason to use one or the other, but that's the one I'm using. We want to create a new management pack. I'm going to give it a very good name here. MPU 2022.error.monitoring. I'm going to store it in the store database. We could also store this in the file system. There's no reason not to. And here we get to choose which version of Scom to use, 2016, 2019, or 22, and whether we want the references for a Windows management pack, an SNMP management pack, or a Linux management pack. I'm using Windows, and I'm going to deploy to 2019, so we'll put in the references for 2019. I'm just going to create an empty management pack, and we'll go on. So as this opens, there's two things we're going to do next. We want to make sure that the rules and monitors that we're going to be using here only run on our watcher node. Now, a watcher node is a system that is used as a delegate. It watches over something else rather than monitoring its own operations. Because in our hypothetical situation, this is a NAS that we can't monitor directly, we need to have a different computer that will monitor and run these workflows to monitor that NAS. Now, we're going to create a watcher node, and we need to specify which computer or computers it runs on. And to do that, there's sort of two ways we can do that. One thing I have done, and this is already set up here, is I've created a registry entry on this system. This was the machine we were just looking at. So I have a registry entry here under the key software / MPU 2022. I created this entry watcher node with a value of true. It's a string. The idea here is to be able to uniquely identify machines we want something to run. Often this is installed software, that sort of thing. In this case, I simply manually set this so that we can query it. And we can use that to create a class. We run the workflows against that class. It'll only run on this one machine. The other way we can do that is we can create a group and make sure that the group members are the systems that we want to use as watcher nodes. And I'll be showing you how to do that as well. So if we come back here, there's sort of two things we're going to do. We're going to create the class for the discovery, and we're also going to create a group for the discovery. We'll show you using the group later. So let's discover that class. Now, it's a registry entry. I am not on the same domain as that machine, so I have to manually enter the data here. Normally, I could just browse to that machine, but unfortunately, because of connectivity, I'm not. What we'll do is we'll add the entry. And I have this all on another screen, so I can copy and paste it and not make major typing mistakes. Watcher node, and it is going to be regSZ, and I'm going to save that. There's one thing I want to point out here is that this is 64-bit flag is set to false. I will want to make that true later, and I'll show you how that's done. If we were browsing to the local machine, the remote machine, we would have seen that it was in the 64-bit registry, and it would have been set automatically. We're going to base this on local application, which is a good choice for this sort of thing. We're going to give it a reasonable name here, registry class discovery. That sounds good. We're going to target Windows operating system. So this will run on all computers that have a Windows operating system. And it'll only create the class on those machines where it finds the corresponding registry entry. Here tells us what we're going to be looking at, watcher node equals, and we want to make sure that we're looking for this value true. We're going to run this by default once every day, but it's run immediately upon importing the management pack, which is good because it takes several minutes to complete. Now, as I mentioned, by default with the manual entry, it's looking in the 32-bit registry, and so that's this line here, and I just need to remove that. If I had browsed, this wouldn't be necessary. What I'm going to do is I'm going to save that and deploy it right now so that the discovery starts. Then I'll go and create the group. And so that tells me it's going to deploy it, and it's now deploying it in the background. And I will wait for it, but I don't think I have to. There we go. So we'll call this MPU 2022 group. It's going to be, we're going to use Windows Computer, and then we're going to have a set of rules here. Now, for my first example, I'm just going to use that the net BIOS name equals that machine name. Sure, I typed it right. There are other ways to do this, and we'll discuss manually adding members to this group later. But for the time being, that'll do it. So this is going to run, and it'll create a group, and the group will consist of objects that are Windows computers where the NetBIOS computer name matches that one machine, so it's going to create a group with one member. We will be using that later, but I do want to get it deployed as well so it can start to get populated. The trouble with doing these demonstrations is that sometimes Scom takes a couple of minutes to do these sorts of operations, so we do want to make sure that we get ahead of ourselves on that. I'll demonstrate that, the result of that shortly. Okay. So now we need to use that fragment that Kevin has created. So let's import a fragment. I've already selected it, but this is the new one, rule event log, then script. If you don't have the current set of fragments, you can click this button down here, download fragment from library from GitHub, which will tell me that I'm completely up to date. I fill in all of these properties here. Now, of course, I've gone through this once or twice for demonstration. So company name, we'll give it an app name of MPU 2022. We'll give it a unique ID. And I like to use things like time of day for stuff like that. The registry class here is probably got a different name because this was set up for an earlier test, and I haven't been using consistent names here. But we do have that class, so we'll specify that. We're going to be looking in the application log. We talked about this for event 123, and the event source is event create. So down here is the fragment itself. If you're not familiar with them, fragments is a part of a management pack that has certain parameters that get replaced. That's the simplest way to look at them. In this case, we're going to be creating a module type. It's a data source module, and it consists of two things. One is the first data source is this Windows event provider. This is going to look on the specified computer name and the specified log, so application. It'll be looking for this event display number equal to, in our case, 123, and the publisher is going to be event create. When that event occurs, it would then run the second probe action. If the event doesn't occur, the second probe action will never run. The PowerShell property bag probe runs a PowerShell script when it's triggered, and it returns a property bag, and we'll see what that looks like in a minute. The rest of this is Kevin's script template. And Kevin's put a lot of thought into this, and he's got a lot of good stuff that you should look at here. He logs information which can be particularly useful here, when, who did it, that sort of stuff. We're not going to talk about that in any great detail here, but the important thing is that we create this property bag, we evaluate some stuff, and this is where we'll put in that script we were looking at, and then we populate that property bag. So he's returning the event display number, publisher name, event log, the description, parameter from the event, and dollar stuff. And we already saw that. He returns all of that in the bag, and then he does some final logging here. So what we want to do is we want to replace this code with the script we were talking about. So I'm going to edit the XML here, go down until I find that stuff, and copy, paste, and I have no idea why it's indented. Probably does not matter, but we'll just get rid of the indenting. This is exactly the same script we saw before. So the important thing is that after all the evaluation, it's populated this dollar stuff variable, which we're going to put into the property bag, and we can use it later on. And then just to complete how this works, the parameters are passed into the script. And this is the composition here says what order these run in. So that data source was the one that was looking for the event. And when it's found, it runs the probe action, which creates the property bag, which is the output type of this, and that's returned. And then the rule is rather simple. These are those parameters I was talking about. You know, company name was select, and app name was MPU 2022. The class ID are filled in. And so it uses that data source module that we've just seen, passes in the information that we want, the log name, the event ID, and the event source. It'll run that, and when and if that returns, it will then execute the write action, which is going to generate an alert. It fills in parameters like the display name, publisher name, event log, and it fills in the stuff. The suppression here avoids duplicate alerts being raised by a rule. That's very important. And then we have string resources, which includes the event description or the alert here. So now that we've filled in everything, and normally it doesn't take anywhere near that long, we import it, and then we have our rule, and we have our module type. And if we were to quickly look at the module type XML, we will see our script down here. There's our script. So that's ready. We can save that. We can save that, and we'll deploy that. Now, while that's deploying, we should have our discoveries done. So let's switch back here, and we'll come to the Scom console. I'm going to come back to the monitoring pane here. I want to go to discovered inventory. I want to change my target type, and I'm looking for MPU 2022. So we have the group and we have the registry class here. So the registry class was the one we were interested in, and it has in fact been discovered. And if we look at the path here, that's this machine, the one that we had the registry entry for, and no other machines. If we want to look at the group, we can do a similar thing here. We just need to find the correct group. And it doesn't seem to want to find it yet. Let's just do a clear here. As I said, these things occasionally take a while to get loaded up. Let me just refresh that to see if that helps. If not, we're not using the group right now. I can show that to you later. Let's just do our find again, but it should be here. There it is. And we can look at the group members, which is that same machine. So this is another way of identifying Wi-Fi nodes in this case. And just while I'm here, if you select properties on that group, you can specify explicit members. We, in our rules, specified a dynamic member, but you can specify explicit members. You can add, remove specific objects here. And so if I come down here, We want Windows computer, and we want to search for things that start with temp. There's a list of 4 machines. That's the one that's already there, but we could add the other management servers or any other computers here, or a SQL machine here if we wanted to. Clearly, I'm not going to do that right now. If you have a dynamic membership, you can have things included that you don't want, and so you can explicitly exclude them if you want as well. We don't need to do any of that, but I like to show this. So if we come back to our monitoring here, I want to just look at active alerts. The alert we're going to create is a warning event, a warning alert. So I wanted to show that we have a short list of those here. Nothing terribly current. Hopefully everything's been imported enough now and it's had a chance. I did not really want to do that. So let's create the event. So if we were to look in the application event log here, let me just do a refresh. There's the event we just created, and we look, there's our event source, event create, that's the one we're looking for. Event ID is 123 on this machine, and there's that rather useless message that we were talking about. Now, if we've been lucky, that was processed in time, and we have this event, this alert. And you will note here that it has produced some information here. And number of files is 0, and file size is 0. So it ran, but it wasn't able to access that share. We know the share is good. We can see that. We can see that. Not quite sure what I did there. Oh, I must have clicked the wrong place. Okay. So we know that the share is accessible. We've run it in PowerShell. The difference is that when I run it as PowerShell here and look at it here, I'm logged in as myself and I'm an admin and I have all the privileges here. But when Operations Manager ran that rule, it ran it using the default agent action account. Now, the default agent action account is normally like local system or something even less privileged than that. It's only designed to look at properties of the local machine, not stuff across the network. Without access to that, it couldn't find the files and therefore couldn't actually get a total here. So this is something that actually I was expecting, and fortunately, it's fairly easy to work around. What we are going to do is we're going to create a secure reference. This allows us to attach a set of credentials to rules, monitors, and workflows so that they run in the context of those credentials. I am going to give this a better name here. Brilliant name, but a better name. And we're creating the secure reference. Now, a secure reference doesn't contain the credentials itself. It's a placeholder where we can attach them later, and I'll show exactly how we do that. We also have to tell the module type to use those credentials. So over here, we have the run as credentials, and we can select this MPU 2022 secure reference. Now, when I save that and deploy it, and here, unfortunately, we're going to have a short wait because the secure reference has to be recognized and the workflows have to be updated. It does take about a minute or two, but we'll go through and show the results of that. The secure reference shows up in the administration tab here under profiles. And I'm not sure I'm going to have it yet. Let's just do a refresh. I don't see it yet. There we go. So there's our secure reference. That's the one we just created. Right now, that has no credentials associated with it. And what we want to do is we want to add the credentials. Now, I already have a high privs window account set up here that I can simply select. It's actually my credentials. I've used it from some other testing, but that's all we need. So now the secure reference has a set of credentials associated with it, and it's just populating the database, and then that needs to be distributed. And fortunately, this is all on the local machine, so it's not too bad, but it can take several minutes. So if we execute that same event creation now, it'll probably still give us the 0. Let me just close that alert. We don't expect that to be distributed yet. So here's our new event. We should get the alert raised here, but the credentials probably haven't been distributed yet, so it still fails and gives us the 0 values. And just for what it's worth, while we're waiting for that, this example of PowerShell coding is ridiculously simple. We should have error handling in there. We should catch the fact that we don't actually have access to this share. So we'd have a try catch in here. We would have populated this stuff with a message saying we don't have access, and we do produce better stuff. But for a demonstration, I want to keep it as simple as possible. So we'll close that alert. And we'll come back and see if it's been populated yet. Back here, just do our refresh. My mousing is off today. And there we go. So now it's telling us that we have 13 files for a total file size of 475 gigabytes, which is exactly what we expected. So now we have a more actionable alert. We know what's happened, and we have some data here. So if this scenario was true, at 475, we might say, oh, we know that there's a half a terabyte allocated for this. We're running out of space, and we know what to do about it. Obviously, we could have done a lot more in detecting the error situation. It might have been offline, and we would want to detect that. It could be credentials. There's all sorts of things it could be. But this is a pretty good way of doing it. Now, that's one way of creating a watcher node and identifying it. We also talked about the group. And as we saw, the group is here with our one group member that we wanted, which is this guy here. So let's go back and do this a different way. What I want to do is I want to edit this rule. Now, I can't use or edit with Wizard because this rule isn't compatible with our Wizard. So we're going to do some editing with XML in this case. So I want to change the target. I don't want to be using that registry class anymore. What I want to do is I want to target Windows operating systems. So this rule would run on all Windows operating systems, but I want to disable it. So it is targeted for all Windows operating systems, but it's disabled. And what we're going to do is we're going to enable it with an override, but only for the members of that group. Now, the class is no longer used here, so I'm going to delete it, and it's discovery. I'll make sure I get the right thing here. So that's this discovery. So we want to delete that class. Sorry, I could have deleted the class. We want to delete that. So we know that we're no longer using it. The only thing we have is the group. Now, when we go to the rule here, we would want to manage overrides. This takes a second to load up. Now, we don't want to do it for a class. We want to do it for a group. So we select the groups here. While the dropdown has all the groups we have, by default, it's selected the first group that's defined in this management pack because that's the thing we're most likely to want to use. And what we want to do is we want to create an enable override, and we want to give it a value of true. So this says that for all members of that group, we want to set the enable flag to true for this rule. There we go. And I'm at a loss why. Oh, it might have already done the save. Let me just try reopening that. This is something I ran across yesterday, and I'm a little concerned. There's the override. It just wasn't showing up. It was a caching thing. So we do have our override. We deleted the class, so we're only using the group now. So we can deploy that. Now, when we deploy this, because the secure reference needs to be reset, and we'll come back and do that. You'll see how that happens here. If we go back here to administration, we look for our MPU profile. If we look at the secure references here, that account got disconnected because we deleted the class. So we're going to reconnect it here. And of course, this will take a moment or two before it actually gets distributed. It'll take a moment or two. There we go. So that's going to run. It'll take a second. So while we're waiting for that, I did want to just show a new feature that's coming in V11 because we do have a bit of time here. Let me start MP Studio here. Here's our management packs. You know, we can also edit them in MP Studio, and we can use them here as well. But we do have this new feature. We don't need it right now, but I thought I'd demonstrate it. We're calling it Scom Explorer. We can explore an entire management group, or we can explore just a management pack and the elements that are referenced, the management packs that are referenced in it. But by default, this gives us a list of all the management packs and all the monitors and all the classes, everything that's in the management group here. We can filter to individual things if we only want to see the classes here. We can also do a search, and that searches through basically everything in the entire management group that quickly. So these are the parts of the MPU 2022 here. So for instance, our rule here, I think we looked at this briefly before. There's our rule. We can look at the module type. We will see that same script we're familiar with now. There's our script. But we can also see all the references here. So if we were looking at this module type and we were wondering who it's referenced by this rule. If we click, we go through to that rule. We see its target. We can see the data sources it's using, its right action. It's going to generate an alert. We can even see the alert message here. We can see that it is referenced by this override. We can see the XML for the override, MPU group here. It's enabled override to true, etc. There's a lot of other stuff we can do. If we go and just search for classes here, we have our class, which is a group, so we can look at the group members. So this is looking at my my Kempville group here. That's the 2019 group that we've deployed to. So we do have our group members here. If I look at something that's got a little bit more information here, like our M365, we have our watcher nodes, so we can see that there are 13 instances of watcher nodes on that system. I can also look at my 2022 system and look at watcher nodes here. And there's only one instance here, so it's more minimal here. We can also, I'm just going to come back to the 2019 here. If we look at things that are groups here, we can see group members. We can also search by GUIDs. So we can use the GUIDs to find any of the elements here, but we can also find instances. Let me just very quickly cut and paste one here. So just by typing in the GUID of an instance in this case, it shows me that it's this VMIC 2016 Scom, which is currently in maintenance mode. It gives me all the various properties of that. If I click OK, it'll select the classes that that object implements. We can look at the properties of those classes. We can also look at the hierarchy of classes here. So a number of objects will show us the hierarchy. So it's an agent, and derived from that is management server agent. If we use a shift or control, we get a lot more information about it, all the relationships, who it's discovered by, who it's referenced by, et cetera, various types of things that reference it. This applies to classes. Let's go back here. You can do the same sort of thing for management packs here. Actually, let me do this one. So this tells me that the M365 management pack is referenced. Sorry. The M365 management pack is referenced by 3 management packs, so the dashboard, the overrides, and the secure reference library. And it shows me all the referenced MPs here, omitting a bunch of detail. Like System Health Library has already been shown up here. It includes system libraries. We don't necessarily want to include all of that many times. So it does this for many, I think 6 or 7 different things that have parent-child relationships. It'll give you that information. Coming back to this, we now should have everything distributed properly. So we'll just generate that new event. Here's our new alert, and it's generated the right stuff. So we have our 13 files and 475 gigabytes of data. And this was based on using a group for our watcher node identification.